All right, strap in, everybody, because today we're going deep into the world of genetic engineering and de-extinction.
Bringing back extinct species.
Exactly. It's like something right out of science fiction, but it's becoming a reality. And there's this company, Colossal Biosciences.
Yeah.
And they're really leading the charge.
Yeah, and I think what makes Colossal so interesting is they're not just aiming to, recreate these animals in a lab somewhere.
Right.
They're talking about actually rewilding them.
Releasing them back into the environment.
Yeah, potentially influencing entire ecosystems.
And their first step towards bringing back the mammoth, it's actually pretty surprising they've created these woolly mice.
Yeah, the woolly mice are fascinating.
So how woolly are we talking?
Well, Colossal, they edited 7 mouse genes related to hair growth and even 1 mammoth gene related to fat metabolism.
Wow, 7 mouse genes and 1 mammoth gene.
Yeah, and it's all to give these mice longer, thicker hair.
Okay.
It's a way to kind of explore how the woolly mammoth adapted to those really, really cold temperatures.
Mm-hmm. So they're basically using these mice as like a model for what they eventually want to do with elephants.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way to test the waters, so to speak, before moving on to a much, larger and more complex animal. But I think it is important to be clear here. Modifying a few genes in mice is a far cry from actually recreating a woolly mammoth.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a pretty big leap.
Right, it is a huge leap.
So I imagine there's quite a bit of skepticism in the scientific community.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of scientists see this as, more of a publicity stunt than a serious scientific endeavor. They argue that the complexity of recreating an extinct animal is just massive. We're talking about not just the genes,
Right.
but the environment behavior, even the microbiome.
So Colossal has a lot to prove.
They do.
What's their response to all the skepticism?
Well, they argue that even if these woolly mice don't lead directly to a mammoth, they're still valuable tools for understanding how genes work and for developing new gene editing techniques. They say that, this research could have benefits for conservation too, potentially helping to save endangered species.
I can see that, even if they don't reach the summit of Mount Everest,
Yeah.
they're still learning a lot about climbing along the way.
I think that's a great analogy, and it does highlight the potential benefits of this research, even if the ultimate goal of bringing back a mammoth remains, out of reach.
So let's say they do figure out how to overcome the scientific hurdles. How would they even go about creating a mammoth-like elephant?
Well, they're putting their faith in CRISPR technology.
That's that revolutionary gene editing tool.
Exactly. The idea is to use CRISPR to edit the DNA of Asian elephants and introduce mammoth-like traits, so thicker hair,
Right.
subcutaneous fat for insulation, and maybe even changes to their blood to help them tolerate the cold.
It's amazing to think we have the technology to even attempt something like this.
It really is.
But wouldn't that be an incredibly complex undertaking?
Oh, absolutely.
How would they even get a mammoth-like elephant embryo to develop? And what about the ethical considerations of creating a hybrid animal?
Yeah, you're hitting on some really big questions here.
Yeah.
The technical challenges are huge. Elephants have incredibly long gestation periods.
Right.
And there's so much we don't know about how these genetic modifications would impact development. And you're right about the ethical concerns, too. Creating a new type of animal raises all kinds of questions about animal welfare and, our responsibility to these creatures that we're bringing into the world.
This is definitely a lot to think about. And I bet our listeners have a lot of thoughts and questions about this already.
I bet so.
If you're finding this as fascinating as we are, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this whole de-extinction thing in the comments below.
Absolutely. We want this to be a dialogue. So share your perspectives and let's explore this together.
So we've got these woolly mice, the dream of mammoth-like elephants roaming the tundra. But what's the bigger picture here? Why is Colossal so focused on bringing back these extinct giants?
Well, they have this vision of rewilding vast areas of the Arctic with herds of these mammoth-like elephants. And they argue that these animals could actually play a role in combating climate change.
Whoa, how would that even work?
The theory is that by grazing and trampling the land, these animals would help to restore grasslands, which are much more effective at absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Interesting.
They could also help prevent permafrost thaw, which is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions.
So they're basically picturing these mammoth-like elephants as ecosystem engineers.
Exactly. They argue that these animals could help to reshape the Arctic landscape and create a more balanced and resilient ecosystem.
Okay.
But there are a lot of critics who say that this is a very simplistic and potentially dangerous approach.
Oh, why is that?
Well, for one thing, we don't fully understand the complex relationships within the Arctic ecosystem.
Right.
Introducing a large herbivore like this could have unforeseen consequences and could disrupt the delicate balance that already exists.
So it's not as simple as just plopping a bunch of mammoth-like elephants into the Arctic and calling it a day.
Not at all. It would require careful planning, ongoing monitoring, and a really deep understanding of the potential ecological impacts.
So we've talked about the scientific challenges and the potential ecological impacts, but let's not forget about the ethical dimensions of all this.
Yeah.
I mean, is it even right to bring back a species that's been extinct for thousands of years?
Right.
And what about the welfare of these animals?
These are the questions that are really at the heart of the debate.
And these are exactly the questions that we're going to dive into next. So stay tuned as we explore the ethics of de-extinction and the future of these ambitious and some might say audacious plans to bring back the past.
It's a really complex issue. I mean, on the one hand, you have the potential to restore biodiversity, maybe even right some of the wrongs that humans have inflicted on the planet. But on the other hand, we're talking about manipulating life at a very fundamental level.
Yeah, it's like that whole playing God argument that always comes up when we talk about genetic engineering.
Right, exactly. And it's not just a philosophical concern either.
Right.
We have to consider the very practical implications as well.
Like,
What if these mammoth-like elephants suffer as a result of our tinkering?
yeah.
What if they disrupt existing ecosystems in ways that we can't even predict?
It seems like there's a real tension here between like the excitement of scientific progress and the need for caution and ethical responsibility.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to really weigh the potential benefits against the risks and to make sure that we're proceeding thoughtfully with a deep awareness of the ethical implications.
Yet it almost feels like we're at this turning point, not just for science, but for humanity as a whole. Like,
Right.
we're developing these incredibly powerful tools.
Right.
And we have to figure out how to use them wisely.
I completely agree. And it's not just about de-extinction either. These gene editing technologies have the potential to revolutionize medicine agriculture, even how we understand ourselves as a species.
It's mind-blowing to think about the possibilities.
It is.
But also a little bit daunting.
Yeah, I think it's important to approach this with a sense of both wonder and humility,
Right.
We are on the cusp of a new era, and I think we have the responsibility to shape it in a way that benefits all life on Earth.
So Colossal is pushing forward with this, grand vision.
Yeah.
But they're not the only ones in this de-extinction game, are they?
Oh, no, not at all. There are other scientists working on bringing back all sorts of extinct creatures.
Really? Like what?
Passenger pigeons, Tasmanian tigers,
Yeah.
you name it.
It makes you wonder if we're focusing too much on bringing back, these individual species and not enough on protecting the ecosystems that are still intact.
Yeah, that's a really valid point, and it raises the question of what success even looks like when we're talking about de-extinction. Is it simply about creating a genetically similar animal, or is it about restoring a species to its, former ecological role?
And can we ever truly recreate that complex web of relationships?
Yeah.
That existed between a species and its environment, especially after thousands of years of change?
Those are questions that scientists and ethicists are really grappling with right now, and there are no easy answers.
It does seem like the more we learn about de-extinction, the more questions we uncover.
Yeah, that's the nature of scientific inquiry. We're constantly pushing the boundaries of knowledge, and with each new discovery come new questions and new challenges.
And speaking of challenges, let's talk about the practicalities of rewilding for a second.
Yeah.
Let's say Colossal does manage to create a herd of these mammoth-like elephants.
Okay.
Where would they even put them?
That's a key question, and it's not just about finding a suitable habitat. It's about making sure that these animals can actually thrive in a world that's vastly different from the one that their ancestors lived in.
So it's not as simple as just finding a big empty space and letting them loose.
No, not at all. We need to consider things like potential conflicts with existing species, the impact on local communities, even the risk of disease transmission.
It really underscores the complexity of de-extinction, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not just about bringing back a species, it's about reintegrating that species into a complex and ever-changing world.
Exactly. And it's a responsibility that we should not take lightly.
If you're finding all of this as thought-provoking as we are, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
We'll be diving deeper into these questions in future episodes, so stay tuned.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts too. So share your comments below and let's continue this conversation.
Okay, so we've talked about the science, the ethics, the challenges of rewilding. But there's another aspect of de-extinction that I think is worth exploring, the cultural impact.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, think about it. Mammoths, dodos, these extinct creatures, they've become almost mythical figures in our collective imagination.
Yeah.
They represent this lost world, a time before humans dominated the planet.
You're right. They've become symbols of both the power and the fragility of nature.
Exactly. And the idea of bringing them back, it taps into something really deep within us.
Yeah.
I think this longing to connect with the past, to undo the damage we've done, to almost like rewrite history in a way.
It's almost like a form of redemption,
Yeah.
a way of making amends for our role in their extinction.
And maybe that's part of the reason why this whole topic generates so much buzz. It's not just about the science. It's about our relationship with nature, our sense of responsibility, our hopes and fears for the future.
It's a really powerful narrative, and it's one that resonates with people on a very deep emotional level.
But there's also a danger in romanticizing these extinct creatures,
Right.
We have to be careful not to lose sight of the real challenges of conservation and the urgent need to protect the species that are struggling to survive right now.
Absolutely. De-extinction should never be seen as a substitute for traditional conservation efforts.
Right.
It's not a magic bullet that will solve the biodiversity crisis.
It's more like a new tool in the toolbox, one that
Yeah.
we need to use really carefully and thoughtfully.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that even if we do succeed in bringing back these extinct species, they will be entering a world that is vastly different from the one that they left behind.
Right. They'll be facing new challenges, new threats, new competitors.
And their success will depend not just on our scientific ingenuity, but also on our ability to create a world where they can truly thrive.
This whole de-extinction thing, it really makes you think about the long game, doesn't it?
It does. It forces us to consider not just the immediate consequences of our actions, but the legacy that we're leaving for future generations.
We're talking about shaping the future of life on Earth.
We-
It's a heavy responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity.
I think so. So it's one that we should approach with both caution and optimism.
We've been on quite a journey today, haven't we? From woolly mice to mammoth dreams.
We have.
We've explored the science, the ethics, and the cultural impact of this whole de-extinction thing.
It really has been fascinating, and I think it highlights just how complex this whole issue is.
Yeah, it really makes you think. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that, this isn't just some abstract scientific debate.
Right.
This is about the future. We're creating the kind of world we want to live in.
Absolutely. And it's a future that we're all shaping, whether we realize it or not. The decisions we make today, the conversations we have, the actions we take, they all have an impact on the trajectory of de-extinction and the future of life on Earth.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in this whole saga?
Well, I think on a scientific level, the research is going to continue. Colossal and other teams are working to refine these gene editing techniques and to overcome those technical hurdles we talked about, and also to gather more data on the potential ecological impacts of rewilding.
And on a societal level,
Yeah,
I think we need to keep having these conversations.
absolutely.
Engaging with the ethical questions and making sure that we're developing, clear guidelines and regulations for de-extinction efforts.
I completely agree. This is a very powerful technology with the potential for both great good and great harm.
Yeah.
We need to proceed thoughtfully and collaboratively, bringing together scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public to make informed decisions about how we want to use this technology.
It's a big responsibility,
Yeah.
but it's also a really exciting time to be alive. I mean,
Yes.
we're witnessing this convergence of science, ethics, and culture
Yeah.
in a way that could completely reshape our relationship with the natural world.
It really is a remarkable moment in human history, and I, for one, am very curious to see where this journey takes us in the years to come.
Me too. And I hope our listeners will continue to follow along with us, as we explore these uncharted territories.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of woolly mice and mammoth dreams, be sure to share this episode with your friends and family.
Yes.
The more people we can engage in this conversation, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complex challenges and opportunities of de-extinction.
Absolutely. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into fascinating and thought-provoking topics. We'll see you in the next episode.